I'm Ken Biberaj, and welcome to Coffee with Ken, a thought leadership series at the nexus of business and politics. We are here in person in downtown DC with former Congressman, presidential candidate, and now Chief Strategy Officer for Chaos Industries, Will Hurd. Good to see you, Congressman.
Thanks. It's great to be here. Great to be seen. I'm looking forward to the chat.
Excellent. And look, right out the gate, I mean, you miss DC?
Well, on beautiful days like this, it's pretty amazing. It's now a month from now, we probably wouldn't be sitting out here. We'd be sweating our tails off. But I always remind people, the DC as a city, and it's cool coming back now. DC as a city is a cool town.
Yeah.
Right? Great things to do, great things to see. So I always enjoy it. Hopefully, my newborn daughter will be old enough where I can bring her up here pretty soon.
Well, congrats on that, by the way. You look wet rested and ready to hit the ground running.
Well, I don't like to talk about that because my wife's doing all the heavy lifting.
As they always do.
As they always do.
Well, look, Congressman, I was so excited to read your book, American Reboot. Incredibly controversial. You suggest things like showing up, listening, being honest, doing the right thing. What was the motivation in writing this, and what do you hope the takeaway is for folks who kind of, go through it?
The motivation was, I've been fortunate to have some really interesting experiences. And when I realized, how did I come to some of the conclusions I've come to? And a lot of it was, there was one specific thing that prompted that understanding. Yeah. And so I try to use, each chapter in the book kind of starts with that thing that helped me lead to that realization, right? And it's everything from my time, when I left Texas A&M at 22, I was in the CIA. I was undercover officer in the CIA, and my job was to be overseas and recruit spies and steal secrets and defend the nation against the most, dangerous of adversaries. And did it. I was here in the DC area for 2 years in training, 2 years India, 2 years Pakistan. I was in New York doing some interagency work, and then I was in Afghanistan for a year and a half. Wow. And I was in CIA when 9/11 happened. And so all those experiences, had an impact on me. And then running for Congress, obviously, the things I learned in a tough district, right? Yeah. It was one of the only districts in Texas that was competitive. So in November, it was only one of a handful of seats where either a Republican or Democrat win. And winning a seat like that, holding a seat like that requires, is different than if all you have to do is care about the primary. So I thought to use all of those things and talk about how, if we want as a country want to continue have another 275 years of this exceptionalism, then we need to start doing something different. And I said reboot specifically because I'm not saying changing things. I'm like, let's get back to that fresh operating system, right? And because the values that have made us great over these last 275 years can continue for another 275.
You've spoken like someone who did IT modernization and the need for a reboot. Drill down into that a little bit, right? Sometimes you look at our country and you pause and you think some days we're super strong, some days we feel vulnerable. What is your assessment of how exactly we kind of move forward?
Sure. Well, look, so I ran for Congress the first time because in addition to collecting intelligence to protect the homeland, I had to brief members of Congress. And I was pretty shocked by the caliber of some of our elected officials. And I thought they were countering what my friends and I were putting ourselves in harm's way, putting our lives on the line in order to defend. They were doing the opposite. And so a guy put the idea in my head, have you ever thought about District 23? And I was like, what the heck is District 23?
Is that a taco joint?
Yeah, no, seriously. And then, so the first time I ran, I lost a runoff by 700 votes, which is not a lot of votes.
Yeah.
And I joined a consulting firm called Crumpton Group, and I helped a guy named Matt DeVoe build FusionX, which was a cybersecurity company. And in that experience, learning about how fragile our digital infrastructure was, that was really where that experience came from. And it was because of that experience when I did run and win, I got to run a subcommittee in Congress as a freshman. It's rare to do that. Right. And I held the first hearing on artificial intelligence.
Wow.
I was doing stuff on quantum computing This is well before anybody was talking about it. And you see how fast technology is moving. If you look at the last 40 years, and I say 40, 40, start of the personal computer, right? Where IBM PC, revolutionary, right? From there to ChatGPT coming out, right? That technological change and that evolution is a crazy period of time. However, the next 40 years is going to make the last 40 years look like we're a bunch of monkeys playing in the garden sticks, right? And so things are moving so fast, so we got to be prepared for it. So that's why I've always tried to focus on these things. I like now that IT procurement is on the national consciousness, right?
Yeah.
And it's important because that infrastructure, how we interact, how we provide services to citizens, how companies interact and provide their services, all that matters. And there's a fragility because we're in a competition. We are in a geopolitical competition with the Chinese government, and making sure that infrastructure is strong and can evolve is important.
Yeah. So I want to focus on your time in Congress for a moment.
Yeah.
What was that experience like? If it felt as an outsider who admired how you approach things, on one day you can make Democrats mad, on one day you can make Republicans mad, you always kind of, it seemed like, held the line, try to stay idealistic and do what was right. So reflect on that experience, right? Like you run twice, 3 times to get in there, you hold the seat, and then you step back. Was it worth it? Were you happy with your time?
Absolutely. I love my time in Congress. I'm proud of my time in Congress. And to be honest, there's not one decision I made that I regret.
Right.
And for me, look, the way you win in a district that was 29 counties, 2 time zones, 825 miles of border, it took 10 and a half hours to drive across the district at 80 miles an hour, which was the speed limit in most of the district, but I found out the hard way it's on speed limit in all the districts, right? And I won because I said, hey, you're gonna see me, right? These are communities. This was an area larger than the state of Georgia.
Wow.
And I said, you're going to see me. You're not always going to agree with me, but you're going to see me, and you're going to know what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, right? And so I showed up a lot. I did tons of town halls. Right? Like I always set records every year for the number of town halls that I did. And what I learned in that process is be honest, right? Like there was not a decision that I ever made that I didn't think was what was best for the community. And that's why I continue to get reelected. And it was freeing because, as you allude to, when you represent a 50-50 district, that's really 50% Republican, 50% Democrat, no matter what you do, you piss off half the district. And it's actually freeing.
Yeah.
Because you're like, hey, I'm just going to let everybody know. And so there really was
That's a great point,
there really was never an issue that most of my constituents were like, if you were to go to them and be like, okay, this thing's coming up, how is Will Hurd going to vote? Most of them already knew in advance. And so I think that's what people appreciate. And what's fascinating now is, I've been I left Congress in 2020, so end of 2020.
Yeah.
So that was almost a full 5 years ago.
Wow.
People still stop me on the street and they're like, hey, thanks for that thing, and we miss you. And so, I was proud. And the thing that most people don't think about in Congress, like when you think about Congress, you think about these fights on healthcare or Social Security, or who are we going to support in this major geopolitical conflict? That's what we talk about. Or, voting and who's going to win and who's in the majority. But the real work is there's a lot of people that are getting screwed by the federal government, and they need someone to help them. And so that was the thing that I enjoyed a lot, right? And so I love my.
It's very mission oriented, right? Reflecting back on your service.
100%. And look, I wrote the first national strategy on AI. I had 21 pieces of legislation signed into law in 6 years, which is more than most people do in 2 decades, right? I was involved in some of the biggest debates on how to stop ISIS, to you name it, everything with Ukraine. So I was proud, and those were great. Those were great things. I was on the appropriation committee, so learning how you spend hard-earned taxpayer dollars. And yeah, so I was proud when I did, but the part that I love the most is being that actual term representative. Like I always preferred the term representative over Congressman,
Sure.
right? Because that was what my job is.
Amazing. Well, two quick anecdotes in the book, right? You talk a little bit about a kind of message I think you had from your campaign manager about always making sure your audio matches your video. And then I love this story you talk about with Beto O'Rourke and you guys doing a road trip, driving from Texas to DC because of snowstorms, I think.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that, because I think you walked the walk, right?
Yeah.
Like people got to see you in action, you got to live stream conversations, you were always willing to kind of little back and forth.
Here's what I learned, right? Like one of the things you learn in the CIA, lying is hard, right? And when you're creating a cover story or you have an alias or you're doing an operation, which I did many times when I was in the CIA, in a different identity, in a different country, the support you have to execute on that is a lot, right? So it's actually quite easy. Just be honest. And so for me, we always say like your video, the things that you do need to match your audio, the things that you say. And so we have this continued frustration with our political establishment because people get tired of that. You say one thing when you're running for office and you do another thing when you're in. And that's what people want, someone who's going to be that kind of honesty, right? And that experience with Beto was a good example. Beto and I, our congressional districts touched. He was in El Paso, the city of El Paso. I had all the county of El Paso, and we were both in San Antonio. And there was one of the snowpocalypses in Washington D.C., but we still had votes, and we couldn't miss votes. So we said, he actually was like, "Let's rent a car and live stream it." He actually didn't think I was going to say yes, right? And so I said, "Let's do it." And so it was. I forget. It was 34 hours in the car, 31 hours live streamed. We had about 25 million people watch the entire time. And I'll be frank, the first 30 minutes was brutal because we were using Beto's socials and people were like mean to me. Like he's driving, I'm reading all the negativity, right? But after 30 minutes of broken, people are like, "Oh, this is cool." But we had a 6-hour debate on the Affordable Care Act. We debated what was better, pie versus cake, right? But the folks, and here's something that experience confirmed for me, which I'd seen in my district. Way more unites us than divides us. And the public want to see us disagree without being disagreeable, right? Beto and I philosophically had a lot of differences. But we respected one another and we were able to have these conversations. And so it's fascinating. That happened in 2016? 2015? Was it 2015? It was a while ago, right? It was a while ago. Now. Wow. And people still bring that up. Wow. No, it couldn't have been. We were talking about the repealing of the Affordable Care Act. That would have been 2016, 2017. But still, it was a while ago. But it was one of those experiences that I remember. And one of the comments that still sticks with me, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. No, it was about 2 o'clock in the morning. And we were going to stop in Memphis for the night. And this one woman texts and she's like, "Oh my God, I got to work tomorrow, but I don't want to miss anything." And we're like, "It's 2 o'clock in the morning. Go to bed," right? And then that's when we had this long debate about pie versus cake. And the lady afterwards, she goes, "See, I would have missed it." And so it was just stuff like that. It was really cool. And I still get stopped by people all the time and was like, "Hey, that was great." Because it was shocking. And still today, it's probably even more shocking to think that two people from very divergent political views could actually have a friendship, be friendly, and have a debate on this.
That's amazing. So I want to get back to AI. So while you were in Congress, first hearings on AI, you leave Congress, you join the board of OpenAI.
Right.
Talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. Like, where are we today? Where are we headed? Should we be terrified? Should we be excited? what does Congress need to do? How should Washington be thinking about it? And what are the broader opportunities from a competitiveness perspective for the United States?
It is fascinating. So when I left Congress and went on the board of OpenAI, people were like, what's OpenAI?
Yeah.
People were like, can you not get a job? You know? And I'm like, it's kind of like probably one of the more important, probably the most important AI company in the world, or is going to be. And so I had gotten to know Sam Altman because I was doing all this work in Congress on an AI. And look, I describe AI like nuclear fission. Nuclear fission controls allows you to have nuclear energy and power and clean, almost unlimitless power, right? But nuclear fission uncontrolled gives you nuclear weapons that can blow the world up, right? And I think that's an appropriate analogy when it comes to artificial intelligence. Now, artificial intelligence is here, it's going to be evolving, it's going to be growing, and we got to learn how to adapt to it and use it. And how do we use it in order to improve higher order kind of thinking and functioning? We shouldn't be banning it in schools. We should be figuring out how to use it. We should be learning how, look, I like, the days are over when you need, write me a paper on what happened in the War of 1812.
Yeah.
Like that, that's a question we probably shouldn't be answering because all of that information is obtainable very easily.
Yeah.
The question should be, what are the consequences of the War of 1812 that we're still dealing with in 2025?
Yeah.
Right? How did that have like these more thoughtful questions that are going to push us to address higher order things? I think that's what's fascinating about AI. And for me, again, having represented a congressional issue that was so big, I had some areas that were some of the poorest communities in Texas and the nation. The idea that a 14-year-old girl could have a tutor in her pocket, right? And potentially graduate high school at 14, go to college, have an unbelievable career, help her community. The fact that that could happen now is amazing, right? And so we need to make sure that we have the policies in place to allow that, because right now, can you graduate college? How do you graduate high school early? You still got to get a GED.
Yeah.
The GED still has some negative connotations in places. Like, how do we address that? So there's great opportunity, but we also have to learn from the mistakes of technology in the past and not make them. We know the use of social media by teenagers, specifically teenage girls, it's led to an increase in self-harm and issues like depression. We know that. And why did we do that? Because we carved out social media from the rules of traditional media at the time because we thought it was different. No, it's the same thing in a different medium. So we got to make sure that we take things like AI, and it still has to follow the law. It is against the law for a banker to not give a loan for someone trying to get a home because of the color of their skin. So the algorithm shouldn't be able to do that either. And if it does, then that's a violation of law. So let's start. Existing laws all apply to AI, right? And it sounds, you're probably like, that seems obvious, right? But it actually is not the case, right? And so anyways, it's an exciting time. People are talking about it, and it's the curve and the speed at which we're going to see this stuff evolve is crazy. And look, I was on the board when we released ChatGPT. It was a super low-key release in November 21, I think, 21, 22. And we thought, some people, like, we released it to be like, we need it out in the wild for people to be using it, to see some things. We did not expect by the end of the week to have 100 million freaking users, right? And so it was an amazing time. And what's even more fascinating, and I'll end with this, a couple of months before the release of ChatGPT, I was interviewing Sam at an event, and after it was over, some like titans of industry came up to me and cursed me out. It was like, why'd you let him go on and on about all this crazy stuff that's never going to happen? And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Interesting.
And they had no clue. They're like, none of that stuff's ever going to happen.
Yeah.
4 months later, they text me and they're like, my bad.
Yeah.
You know? So it's an amazing time. But look, I get why people are scared.
Yeah.
We should be concerned, and we need more people using it, right? If you wanna regulate AI and make sure its power is not used for bad, you got to use it, right? You got to understand it. You got to know it intimately, in order to say that this is what we need to do with it. So it's exciting. It's the best way I can describe it. But things that are exciting are also scary. Right? I like roller coasters, because they're exciting, but you still scream. So I think that's what we're in. Like I think of my daughter, who's 8 weeks old now, the things she's going to see.
Yeah.
And look, I'm going on. You got me excited about this. When I speak to high schools, I take a typewriter. It's a typewriter I actually use in 7th grade, and it's in a box, right? And I go, does anybody know what's in this box? And they're like, the crown jewels, right? Like it's usually crazy. And I unzip it and I open it up, and all the kids always go, ooh, like it's a heirloom. Like,
I mean, we're old now, Will.
But to me, that's like the beginning. Like that's what I use. My grandmother would always say, I went from horse and buggy to man on the moon. She was born in 1913. He died in the late 80s. And to her, the man on the moon was the seminal technological event in her lifetime. And for me, my horse and buggy is that typewriter. So it's imagine what I think about what is my seminal event. And then now, what is my daughter's typewriter going to be?
Yeah. No, it's a fascinating way to think about it. So the innovation is not just happening online with AI, et cetera. We are here now at your new job that no one's probably asking you that you couldn't get a job because you're now the chief strategy officer for Chaos Industries, coming off of a massive raise. And I want to hear about your connection with Chaos, this relationship that you had with obviously the founder, John Tennant, and his father, George Tennant, and what you've been up to here and what people can expect. And I really want to kind of frame this around like this revitalization of the defense industrial base, because there are new companies popping out that are looking to kind of serve the country in a way where I think our generation was building apps so you can have food delivered. This new generation is making stuff. Like it seems like America is returning to a kind of manufacturing ethos. We are building, we are looking to control our destiny. So I just love your kind of thoughts on the current role and what you're thinking about.
Sure. Well, look, the broader context is we live in a dangerous world, and conflict has changed, and we've seen what's happened in Ukraine between the Ukrainians and Russia. How the asymmetry of warfare is really different. It's no longer about how do you build this huge, massive, expensive thing. Now it's about how do you overwhelm somebody with cheap stuff. If you have a $60 million radar that can get blown up by a less than $20,000 drone, the benefit goes to the person that has a cheaper thing, right? And so speed, volume is the area in which you need to operate. Now, starting my adult life, and basically my entire adult life, I've been involved in national security in some form or fashion. And this geopolitical conflict that we are in with the Chinese government, and I say Chinese government specifically, it's not the Chinese people, it's not Chinese culture. The US and China can coexist. We should be frenemies. We should work together on some things and then compete on others, but it should compete based on the rules that we've all agreed upon, right? That's the biggest issue. So how do we operate and compete in an environment where you have zero communications? We are so fragile because we rely on GPS, we rely on cellular infrastructure. If that goes away, how do we operate, right? So the ability to fight in a communication denied environment is something that I've been talking about and concerned about since my 20s. And what was interesting about Chaos, and I got introduced to Chaos through George Tennant. George has been a mentor of mine since I was 22. And they were creating tools to operate in a communication denied environment. We're creating a radar system that allows the warfighter to have 5 to 10 additional minutes. When you're getting shot at or bombs are about to be dropped on your head, 5 to 10 additional minutes is a lifetime, and we're doing it faster at a fraction of the cost. And we're doing it where you can operate in an environment that is difficult. A conflict in Asia is going to be on island change. It's going to be in the middle of the ocean. It's going to be complicated. And to have something that works in that expeditionary environment is important. And we're called chaos because chaos precedes order, right? And that is what we are bringing, a level of order to the warfighter, because I want to make sure that our sons and daughters, our moms and dads, our brothers and sisters have the greatest tools to defend, right? There's a situation that happened in Jordan almost 2 years ago now. This thing called Tower 22. There was a drone attack on a facility that ended up killing 3 Americans, injured about 40 others. And it was a drone attack. And it was all of our existing base defense did not defend against that, right? Our adversaries know that, and they're adapting to it. And so to prevent something like that, is exciting to work on that and to be working on the cutting edge of technology. So it is great. It's fascinating. I have seen how industry, when I got out of Congress, defense tech was not really that things that people want to invest their money in. Now it's super hot because they recognize the importance and an environment in which the government has to adapt and get tools quicker than your adversary. So whoever's evolving the fastest is going to win. And it's no longer bigger doesn't always beat smaller. More expensive definitely doesn't always beat, less expensive. And so the rules of the games are changed. And so to be part of that, to be able to provide, using deep tech and fascinating engineering to provide tools to the warfighter, to give them that edge on the battlefield. It's exciting. It's exciting to get back to the roots and do it with some really smart people.
No, without a doubt. But talk to us a little bit about that marriage of defense tech innovation, speed, breaking things, going fast, with public policy, rubber hitting the road. What are the inherent kind of challenges we as a nation will face, whether it's procurement, DoD not being fast enough, states and localities not understanding the resurgence in manufacturing and this new wave of innovation?
Look, at the end of the day, I think DoD gets a lot of criticism because procurement takes long. And yes, it is, but also that system has to work. It cannot fail when it's needed. And so that me going to Best Buy to buy a router, and if I take it out of the box and the router doesn't work, I can go back. I'm annoyed, right? But it's not going to lead to the loss of life. So when you're putting tools on the battlefield, you have to have a level of you have to absolutely know that thing is going to do what it's supposed to do when the rubber hits the road. And so that's why some of the testing and evaluation is one part of that process that takes a little longer. So when you build things that works right up front, guess what? You can move through that process a lot quicker. Speed. And honestly, that's what we have seen, and that's been our experience here at Chaos. When you have a product that works, and the customer knows it works, they're gonna try to field it a lot sooner. So now I think cities and states are recognizing that now with a mobile workforce. I think two things have affected that. I think post-COVID, when everybody moved, they're like, hey, there's other options around the world. I think with the cost in some of our cities skyrocketing, the cost of housing, people are looking to move and go to places where they have a good quality of life, but also opportunities. And I think cities and states are taking advantage of that. That's why you see places like my hometown of San Antonio in the news, Nashville, Cleveland. This is a lot of interesting things going on. Those because those city officials and state officials are recognizing the opportunity.
Yeah, in a way that I've never seen before. It's like if the innovation's happening in El Segundo or California or DC or Cambridge or New York, the manufacturing, the production, the building, the high-end talent is going to be dispersed across the country, it feels like. So it seems like a true moment for the nation to kind of a whole-of-government approach to meet these threats and kind of stay competitive, right?
No, look, 100%. I'm in complete agreement, and that's one of those things that, look, people. There's a lot of debates about Is this peak America?
Yeah.
Is Pax Americana over? And it's like, no. It's because the resilience, the creativity, and you're seeing, things evolve differently towards that same mission of making sure that that base is strong. So it's an exciting time to be involved in this industry. And I wish I could say we were never going to have to, sell what we sell, because that means it would be the end of war. But that's never going to happen. And when you deterrence, the way you ensure nobody does something crazy is that they know they're not going to be able to get away with it, right? And to be able to be part in making some of those tools to bring that kind of security, not just to us, but to our allies around the world, is an exciting time.
No, and I just want to close out on foreign policy, on national security. You spent time in India and Pakistan. Today, that's in the news, a bit of a skirmish happening in that region. We've talked a little bit about China. We've talked a little bit about Ukraine. How do you see the geopolitical map, threat assessment, but also power? You talk about it in your book. The absence of kind of exerting power creates a vacuum. Somebody will fill it inherently. So talk a little bit about your views, kind of the state of the world.
The reason India and Pakistan is a powder keg, two nuclear powered enemies, right? They are 100% enemies, and that animosity goes deep, and it's hard for us to understand it because there's really no comparison or a way to compare that animosity between the two countries. There is no question the Indian military is significantly stronger, bigger, more powerful than the Pakistanis. I've served in both countries. And because of that asymmetry, that is why the Pakistanis have always supported terrorist organizations in order to try to keep and to try to use that as a tool against the Indians. But that's why their potential use of a nuclear weapon is always higher, because they know in a conventional fight they can't win. So because of that imbalance, when these kinds of activities happen, it is dangerous and it's scary. And so how do you put that back in, right? And Kashmir is an area that's been debated. It's fascinating. People in Kashmir, they want to be independent. If they were to potentially vote and say, hey, you can't choose, you got to choose either Pakistan or India, they would probably choose India. And the question becomes, this is also a geopolitical play by the Indians, because who's going to stop them? It's similar to what Israel has done with Hamas. Let's root it out. And India is going to be a counterweight to the Chinese government. So the United States is not like when the last time there was potential nuclear conflict was in the early 2000s. And America came in and pressured India to stop. I don't think you're going to see that same level of pressure because of the importance of India, and against China. So it's one of those things. I don't think anybody at the beginning of 2025 had a flare up in India and Pakistan on their top 3 of geo.
It wasn't on the bingo card.
It wasn't. But that also shows how complicated the world is. And I'd always say this is, if most Americans knew how many threats there are in the world, we probably wouldn't walk out our door. But the good thing is, and I'll end with this, is there are thousands of men and women that every single day and every single night is doing everything they can in order to protect America. And the fact that you haven't seen a major attack on the United States is because of those men and women. So I feel confident in our security, but this is going to be an issue that could easily spiral out of control.
Wow. United States Representative Will Hurd, thanks for being on Coffee with Ken. Appreciate you being here. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We're coffeewithken.com, and looking forward to continuing to have conversations and coffee. Until next time.